Hello listeners, welcome to Undercurrents. My name is Ken Ogasawara. In the last episode, we peeled back the layers on what makes a good neighborhood, and more to the point, what makes a good neighbor. We're continuing this theme of good neighborliness in this episode, but in a very different context, and that is between non-Indigenous Christians and Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island. More on that in just a moment. Undercurrents is brought to you as always by our friends at Kindred Credit Union. Kindred is all about helping you make peace with your money through real human advice and by using money as a force for good in your community. And in the spirit of today's conversation, Kindred is also committed to doing their own learning, building partnerships, and mobilizing their resources to make tangible progress towards reconciliation. Go to kindredcu.com to open an account today. In early February 2026, Westside Church in Burlington, partnering with MCC, hosted an event called Lean In and Learn, Loving Indigenous Neighbours.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm just going to get your attention here and just welcome you to this space, to this place this morning. My name is Mark, and I am actually the pastor here at Westside in Burlington.
This event was a specific invitation for churches and Christians to enter into truth and reconciliation work, and to ponder why is this important for Christians to explore? How do non-Indigenous Christians do this in a good way? Where do we begin? To explore these questions and more, 3 non-Indigenous Christian panelists shared parts of their journey in listening, learning, and building relationships with Indigenous peoples in Ontario. Karen Ward, Dr. Samuel Sarpiya, and Doug McLachlin. After a brief opening prayer from Pastor Mark Wall, Indigenous Neighbours blanket exercise facilitator and teacher, Mim Harder, shared the Thanksgiving address, a traditional Haudenosaunee prayer, also known as the words that come before all else. With Mim's permission, I've included here excerpts from the full 8-minute address, which was itself a shortened version of the full 3-day-long version. Then we'll hear from Indigenous Neighbours Program Coordinator Scott Morton-Ninomiya, who shares a bit of his own history, MCC's journey in this work, and sets up the goals and context of this conversation beautifully before diving into it with the panel. It's tough to compress 2 hours of solid gold into a short podcast, and even after editing the main highlights, this will still be an awesome 2-parter. I'm also going to get out of the way for this episode and let those at the event speak for themselves. Please enjoy part 1 of Lean In and Learn, Loving Indigenous Neighbours.
My name is Mim. I am from both settler and First People roots. My First People friends often call me Wingash, which is sweetgrass. I was given this name probably about 15 years ago. And it is not only my name, it's my medicine, but it's my path. And my path is to braid people together, to create understanding, relationships, hopefully long-term friendships, and so that we can walk together in a better way. Today, we have gathered and we see the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty and responsibility to live in balance and harmony with each other and with all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give our greetings and our thanks to one another as people. Now our minds are one. We are thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. Long ago, our people were given a way of peace and strength, and this is symbolized by the everlasting tree of peace, the great white pine. With one mind, we send our greetings and our thanks to the tree life. We put our minds together as one, and we thank all the bird life. Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day, they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we are now grateful to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day, without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. With one mind, we send our greetings and our thanks to our brother, the sun. We give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who's shone beautifully the last few nights, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time. Now we turn our minds to Creator, and we send our greetings and our thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is right here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is around us, we gather our minds together as one, and we send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. If something has been forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send their greetings and their thanks in their own way. We end our words. Now our minds are one. If I had done the traditional version, we could have kept you here for 3 days.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Morton-Ninomiya. I want to begin by adding my thanks to Mim for also jumping in at the last minute and starting with a Thanksgiving address. That's what she felt led to share today. I'm glad she did. And I want to just add my own thanks to Creator for giving us all that we need for the land, the water. I want to honor all the nations that are in the room. I want to honor the Haudenosaunee nations. I know there's members here. I want to honor the Anishinaabe nations and the neutral nations, and all the nations that you come from. So I want to honor all the nations, and I want to thank you folks for hosting us in the home of your faith family, Westside. As a fellow Christian working in the name of Christ with Mennonite Central Committee every day, I'm the Indigenous Neighbours coordinator. Our program, if you will, has been around for almost as long as I've been alive, which is a little over 50 years. And I've been in this role for about 4 years. So that's why I'm up here at the front and involved in this event. And I can tell you more about my work later. As a fellow Christian working in the name of Christ with MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, every day, I also want to honor the beautiful gospel teachings of Jesus, who's the foundation of our shared faith. And these teachings reside deep in my heart. They flow through my veins and they strengthen my bones. They form who I am. And wherever I go, I carry these teachings, especially the one that we're gathered around today, which is, of course, love your neighbor. It's a very central teaching. This teaching has shaped me since childhood. I learned it by watching my parents live out their faith, as many of us do. The question arises again, who is my neighbor when I see them on the side of the road? And the answer comes quickly in my late father's voice. That's your neighbor, Scott. Go and help. And I share this to show what anchors me in my faith. This practical faith is also what brought me to work with MCC, work that has allowed me to walk alongside neighbors from many nations, the Cree, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Tewa, and others. Some of these relationships have grown into kinship. We call each other family now, and that bond deepens with each act and word of love. Through these connections, I've been given glimpses of the teachings that shape them, teachings held in their hearts, carried in their bodies, and lived out daily. Among those that speak most strongly to me are the Anishinaabe 7 grandfathers. These ancient teachings guide people along their life journey as well. Today, I want to share 2 of them with you as we set the tone for our day together, truth and honesty. And I brought 2 cups. You can see 2 cups here. The turtle is for truth, and this is Sabe, also known as Bigfoot, and that represents honesty. So I brought these today to illustrate them. What I have to offer you today is not a formal teaching, but early reflections of a learner who's appreciative of these teachings. Truth makes sense as the turtle. In the Anishinaabe creation story, the world rests on her back. Her shell holds 13 plates, marking the moons, and 28 intersections marking the days. She reminds us of a fundamental truth, that we are always held in the loving embrace of the Creator. Honesty is what we talk about, is how we walk in the world the Creator has gifted us. It's how we bring the truth into being, through our words, our actions, the way we move through life, like Sabe striding through the forest. It's also about the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives that guide our choices. It requires learning, reflection, growth, and deeper understanding.
And that work is ongoing for MCC as well. We can see that long process reflected in the evolution of our language as an organization, as the Indigenous Neighbours team. Like I said, we've been around for about 40 years, almost 50. When we began, we called ourselves MCC Native Ministries. And ministry in itself is not harmful. It shows that we're coming with Jesus. But in our early days, we came with ideas of how Jesus could help the natives, that we were in the driver's seat with the answers to teach and convert. This approach assumed that one side gives and the other receives. Then we became Native concerns and later Aboriginal concerns. These names implicitly cast Indigenous people as a problem for us to solve, people who lacked power or voice. With that framing, we struggled to see strength, sovereignty, or success. Instead, we saw only people who needed saving. And the we here is people like me. Then when we shifted to Indigenous Neighbours, which we are now, something opened. The word neighbor invites us to pause and ask, who is my neighbor? That important question that Jesus asks us. How do we show love? And even more importantly, how do we become the kind of people Indigenous neighbors want to build relationships with? The shift invites us to step back from the impulse to convert, save, or solve. It opens our eyes to what Indigenous neighbors offer us. It opens our ears to wisdom that is ancient, dynamic, alive, and rooted in this land that gives us all life. It invites us to listen first and then act, listening into action. It encourages us to ask what needs to change in our hearts to build relationships of trust, mutuality, and reciprocity. And it challenges us to work together on the systems that keep us locked in unhealthy patterns with our neighbors and with the land on which we live together. Systemic changes take generations, and I hope we can explore those together in future conversations. Today, we begin with listening, and I'm really grateful you're here. So let's lean in, listen, and learn together what it truly means to love our neighbors. And with that, I want to invite the panelists up.
My name is Karen Wart. I am a wife of 45, almost 46 years, mom of 3, grandmother of 5, and the executive director of an organization called Stone Ministries. I have my master's of theology from Tyndale, and I love to travel, but mostly because I have to go to Texas in order to see some of those grandchildren. So that's a little bit about me.
So my name is Samuel Sarpiya. I am Nigerian-born, South African national, and I am a father, a husband, and I'm privileged to have my wife with us this morning, blessed with 3 daughters. I have undergraduate in social work, postgraduate in peace and conflict studies, Masters of Divinity in Conflict Transformation, and a doctorate degree in semiotics and future studies with emphasis in conflict transformation.
Hi, my name is Doug McLachlin. I'm a husband, a father, 2 daughters. I'm also a geotechnical engineer. So that's everything below the ground that you don't see. And we plan for foundations, tunnels, bridges, and things like that. I have a undergraduate degree in geological engineering, a master's in earth sciences, and I spent about close to 20 years, 17 years living and working in China and gaining a really wonderful perspective. I'm also what's called a blooming program coordinator. We reach out and look for opportunities to engage with Indigenous students, high school, college, and university, and explain to them what it's like working in a company like mine.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask, I've got 3 questions that we're going to go through, and I'm going to ask each one of them and then just pass the mic down. Okay, here's the first question. What did you know about First Nations peoples in Canada growing up, and what was the default lens you looked through, and what learning experience did you have that really jump-started your learning and shifting of perspective?
I've been reflecting on this because, of course, I got the questions beforehand, so I've been reflecting on I don't know that because we lived and grew up in Etobicoke, I didn't have any interaction with First Nations. And for me, anything that I learned as a child was really from books and maybe some of the things that we learned in school, but it was sort of nothing that was really impactful. And I think the first time that I started really understanding more about First Nations was when I was 17 and I was a junior forest ranger and I was up in Nays Provincial Park, north of Superior. And it was so beautiful there. And I did occasionally meet people from First Nations, but I thought, this is so beautiful. And so consequently, that's one reason why I'm a geotechnical engineer. I ended up wanting to be up in the north and spent my summers up in the north. At one point, I was flown out between Red Lake and Pickle Lake along the Pipestone River for 23 days. We were doing timber cruising and eventually went up to Windigo Lake. Everything is around here so beautiful. There's only one thing that's out of order, and that's me. I was not yet a Christian at the time. And it was part of my journey, my faith journey, was being in the most beautiful, incredible places. In terms of the real shift that's taken place, because I lived overseas for almost 20 years, a lot of the truth reconciliation activity in Canada was taking place when I wasn't here. So when I returned, that's when I started to hear much more about it, both through my company. So as my company is ACOM, we have Indigenous relations as a huge part of our company because everywhere we work, there are Indigenous communities. We need to engage with them. And I'm learning now more and more we're partnering with Indigenous communities, including Indigenous company, because that's really, truthfully, that's the direction we need to move, and we are moving. We also have a whole team that does archaeology. And we look at, before any development, we have to go in and check to see what sort of archaeological, from either, ancient peoples or First Nations. It's so amazing. And then also, I'll have to say, through MCC. So MCC has a peace conference. And in 2023, I was at the peace conference and we had a blanket exercise. And Mim was there and she shared. And it really deeply impacted me. So that's been sort of, and then it's been a journey since then. So thank you, Mim.
Thank you, Doug. Doug has mentioned these questions were circulated to us. And for me, the tendency is I can go long-winded. So I decided to script myself to be able to give me some kind of bearing. So I said, I'm not familiar with the First Peoples of Canada per se. But when my family moved to the US mainland in 2009, as we got involved in peace building and conflict work that is particularly racial profiling that happens amongst people of color in the US, particularly Black and Latino. But as we look deeper, the profiling went beyond just African American and Latinos. It profiled any person who is non-white, which includes Native Americans, which is the First Nations. So that sort of set the stage for me to start investigating the first people of North America, Turtle Island. But since moving to Canada and Ontario in particular, I have been a part of a church that supports MCC's work in Northern Ontario through its Indigenous Neighbours program. I was privileged to go on a week-long learning tour with Scott. And that trip has really impacted me positively. And since then, continue to consider myself a lifelong learner with a commitment to learning more about Indigenous reconciliation and see how I can contribute to building a beautiful mosaic of different First Nations. Currently, I live in Thunder Bay.
Okay. My story basically starts from being in a white European ancestral family from England and Scotland. I know really nothing about that ancestry, but my perspective was developed by these things. First, my faith influence. I was my very first church experience, and my parents were first generation Christians, was in a conservative brethren influence. I got the opportunity to go to a camp called Minneoe when I was 10 years old. And like most Ontario camps back then, they had been heavily influenced by Ernest Thompson Heaton's Woodcraft Indian Movement. Now, if you don't know who that is, he was the founder of Boy Scouts, and he just loved the Indians and developed this curriculum that was adopted by most camps in Ontario, Christian and non. And I experienced at Camp Minneowi Thursday night antiphonals with the women leaders dressing up as Indigenous women and some of the maintenance men as chiefs out in canoes. Of course, none of them were Indigenous. But then after I left Camp Minneowi, because I actually did end up working there, a chief in a Northern Reserve community contacted my father, who at the time was running an organization called FTC Canada, which was connected to Feed the Children in the U.S. This chief came and said, we really need a way to keep our children busy in the summer. I had just left being a camp director. So my father came to me and said, would you run a children's camp program up on this reserve? And I just looked at him and said, no. That's a ridiculous question, Dad. I know nothing about Indigenous. He said, will you come up? Will you meet the chief? Will you meet the people? Find out what it is they're looking for, hire staff, write the curriculum, train them, and you don't have to go. And I said, will you pay me? He said, yes. So that's what we did. But I had to go up there. I went up there in 2007 of April and had my world rocked. This has set me on a journey that I have asked God to show me truth. I've gone from a Western Eurocentric worldview that I thought was God-ordained to discovering what God's kingdom on earth worldview might look like. But it's a long learning, deep learning, and still learning process that I'm on.
I've mentioned Anishinaabe women and what they've taught me about the water, and another Anishinaabe woman who I've learned from a lot is Patty Krawick. In her book Becoming Kin, she talks about this idea: what if us folks who are non-Indigenous Christians, and I know there's some Indigenous folks in the room, but for those of us who are non-Indigenous Christians, what if we set to thinking about how could we become the kind of people that Indigenous people want to be neighbors with? Were there moments for you, or can you talk about the process of moving from problem to solve to how can I become somebody that Indigenous people would want to be in relationship with?
What we're doing here today, listening, I think is being a good neighbor. And what I found in my company, the communities that we live and work in, so wherever we're working in our company across Canada, we're living and working in Indigenous communities. And so there were training sessions, and I chose to sign up for those training sessions. And so I started learning and listening, and also hearing some very, very, very difficult things, but I would still listen and be willing to listen. And to the point that last summer, we had a land-based Indigenous training session in Windjimmin Land Restoration Project in Kitchener. So there I went, and for the whole day, we were being trained by Indigenous sort of leaders in ministries, I should say in healing, in sweetgrass. We went to a garden. I learned how to do drumming. In fact, the photo that's shown for this event, that was me drumming for the first time. And I heard from the teacher that drumming is actually reminds us of being in our mother's womb. That's the connection with drumming. We were out on the land in the garden, and we were talking about how they're restoring the lands to how it was before the settlers came. And I thought, this is like the Garden of Eden. Everybody talks about the garden. It was so beautiful. We talked about sweetgrass. We actually braided some sweetgrass. And I had the best day of my entire life being there. It was just tremendous. And then in terms of the blooming program, I just learn more and more about it, and I have some Indigenous colleagues now. A leader, Morawchuk, she's been the head and leading, and she's Indigenous. She's sort of leading the Blooming program and has been the architect of the Blooming program. So listening and learning is so important. I'm working on a project in Winnipeg, so in Treaty 1, and we had one of the chiefs there, and they made a comment which was really interesting. They said, "We're so tired of hearing land acknowledgements. We want to be part of this project and partner on this project." That's true. That's going to bring true reconciliation when we're actually working together to develop projects. There's another company in Thunder Bay that Samuel introduced me to, and I had a discussion with him this week. They're now in our system as a sub-consultant, and we're looking for opportunities to partner on projects. That's reconciliation, not just words, but actions.
Okay, so to bring along where I'm at now, I did end up in this community called Mishkikogamang First Nation, which is about a 20-hour drive from here. The last road accessible community up near Pickle Lake. And I have been involved in and alongside that community for almost 20 years now. And I will say that as probably problem solver type person, or at least my kids used to always complain, "You don't have to solve my problems, you just have to listen." So I know I'm a problem solver. I used to wake up almost every single morning, Lord, why would you bring me into um, this ministry area that you're working in and not give me the ability to solve some of these problems that have been going on for 500 years? um, and so I had the opportunity to work in an Indigenous organization for a while and had the incredible privilege of hanging out with great leaders like Ray Aldred. These are people you need to look up. Richard Twiss was a very good friend of mine and wrote an incredible book, One Church, Many Tribes. And Mark Charles, many other leaders I got to hang out with as they were unpacking this from a theological point of view. And so I just have felt very blessed that I've had that while I was walking with the people in Mish. We have used this term that our primary relationship should be that of neighbor. But then I have realized that this statement assumes that we know how to be good and to love any of our neighbors. So the whole idea of what it means to love and to be a neighbor has something I've really had to think about, which has taken me away from assuming Indigenous people as or their issues as problems. One thing that I insist on, if anyone comes to me, well, I've seen many communities or many non-Indigenous ministries and other organizations feeling like, wanting to solve the problem. I've knit all these blankets. Can I send them up? I've got all of these clothes in a bag. Can I send them up with you? Can we send food up? Can we sending stuff up? And that was my mindset at the beginning. But now at Burning Stone, we don't take any of that stuff and do any of that stuff. I have had to break down what it means to love. And I think I have almost 66 years experience and now realize that I suck at loving. And so if we take something as simple as saying, we need to love our neighbor as God has called us to, it's not something you can just switch on and do. It is something that you have to figure out how to do well. And then we have this definition, all these definitions of what love is. When I say in a community where love has not existed, I love you, their first comment back to me is, ooh, gay. Because the only thing that expresses love to them is a sexual relationship. And so if we go into communities and say, Jesus loves you, that means nothing. Only we can be the example of Jesus' love in communities that have dealt with so much trauma. Ray Aldred taught a class that I took called Doing Indigenous Ministry the Good Way. And it went right into what trauma has done. He has said that the 5 lies that colonialism has taught is you are not worthy, you are not good, you are not good enough, you don't belong, and you shouldn't exist. So if you are living with that for generations and generations, going up and saying, I love you, can we hang out, isn't going to change anything. It's this love in this context is sacrificial, absolutely sacrificial. And I could go on, but I will give it before one of them pinches me.
And that won't be me, because I can sit and listen to your stories all day. For me, the journey into becoming a good neighbor did not just begin because of what I have seen here. I come from a world that was colonized by Britain. And not only colonized by Britain, but I come from a world that I am a minority surrounded by predominantly Islamic region in northern Nigeria. And so that means apart from the colonial impact, you have another impact of religious impact. So as a minority, as someone who doesn't sense a sense of belonging is sort of wishy-washy. If you want to belong, then you have to dress the way the British colonial church enterprise wants you to behave. Then you are in. So that's my family's historical background. And so I think for me, that journey has really shaped me to understanding what does it mean to be a minority in a predominantly majority community, to be able to walk in the shoes of people that have been treated in a way that have been made to feel they don't belong. So even as she mentioned, Mark Charles is Native American who in 2016, I got to spend some time with him and invited him to our church denominational conference and at that point he was contesting to join the bandwagon to be US president. And it was when he started really speaking so much more about the unsettling truth, the lies we have been told about the colonial masters. And I realized that the similar lies that were told in North America were similar lies that were told in most colonial Africa. So moving up here, and the fact that I think God has called me into a ministry that I had a clue that I've been called to be involved in the ministry of reconciliation. It's only hindsight that I look back, I go, oh, it seems like there's a track record here in this life. Maybe I need to pay attention. And so from the moment I started paying attention, and going on the Indigenous Learning Tour in Timmins with MCC, I realized that this is how you enter into an Indigenous community. Basically, how I will enter my own community. Not going to fix the problem, but go alongside her. I call it the alongside us journey. And not because I'm there in the community to tell them to fix a problem, but I'm there in the community as a neighbor. And that is the key.
The 3 layers of change and reflection I've been posing at the end of each episode in Season 6 actually come from the Indigenous Neighbours team. So thank you, Scott, for this helpful framework, which begins with change perspective. Was there anything in this conversation that gave you a new perspective on why or how non-Indigenous Christians should engage in truth and reconciliation work? Did you hear stories of changed perspectives from Karen or Samuel or Doug? Maybe you're a doer, and sometimes it's tough for doers to not do, but instead to stop, listen, unlearn, listen some more, relearn. It's slow and steady work. The next layer is changed relationships. Did you hear stories of changed relationships from our panelists? Have your new perspectives on TRC work, for example, led to new relationships or new ways of relating with Indigenous peoples? Finally, the third layer is changed systems. In the spirit of listening and learning, I'll include some resources in the show notes about how systemic injustices continues the work of colonialism to this very day. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission gave 94 calls to action for Canada to implement at system, relational, and personal levels to do our part in supporting healing for Indigenous peoples, and indeed all peoples living in this land that we call Canada. Thank you to the panelists Karen Ward, Dr. Samuel Sarpiya, and Doug McLachlin, and my colleagues Scott Morton-Ninomiya, Mim Harder, and Fiona Lee for putting on this panel. Special thanks to Myrtle Wong, who was the driving force behind this event, and Pastor Mark Wall for hosting us. Tune in for part 2 of this panel discussion in 2 weeks. As always, please subscribe, review, and share with your friends. That really helps people find us so we can keep telling these stories. Huge thank you to Kindred Credit Union for supporting Undercurrents, and this episode was produced with help from Kristen Kong, theme music by Brian McMillan, the logo by Jesse Bergen, and executive produced by Sandra Reimer. My name is Ken Ogasawara. Have a great rest of your day.